and we have to vote on some motions. Alice, I'm going to relinquish the chair to you during this so that I can make some motions during this process. So you'll be the person who asks for the motion in a second and calls for the roll. So let me start. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the emergency ordinance, the Mason District SSPA Task Force, here to be known as Task Force, needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of the task force is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I am going to conduct a roll and ask each task force member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. So I'll conduct the roll call from the top of the list. Robert Chamberlain.
Hi, Marty. Robert Chamberlain, joining you from Alexandria, Virginia, in Fairfax County.
Thank you, Robert. Joshua Booth.
Joshua Booth in Lincolnia in Fairfax County.
Thank you. Jeff Longo.
Jeff Longo, joining from Falls Church, Fairfax County.
Alice Wang.
I'm here calling in from Falls Church.
Barbara Burgess.
Barbara Burgess is here calling also from Falls Church.
Dave Nguyen. Dave. We'll get back. Donna Jacobson.
Donna Jacobson is here from Annandale in Fairfax County.
Thank you. Bill Likos. Bill Likos. Bill, you're muted. We'll come back around. Ed Feig.
Ed Feig is here from Annandale, Virginia.
Welcome, Ed.
Thank you.
Vinod Gupta.
Vinod Gupta is here from Annandale, Virginia.
Thank you, Vinod. Jan Keys.
Jan Keys from Falls Church.
Karen Geyer-Smith.
Karen Geyer-Smith from Fairfax.
And I'm Marty Machowski from Falls Church. Let me go back. Bill, are you with us, Bill Likos? Dave Nguyen. Dave, are you here? Okay, I think Bill is on, but not responding. I don't see Dave on the list, but we'll confirm with them as they come in. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to the co-chairman so that I may be heard and make the requisite motion. So Alice, you have the gavel. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the Mason District's SSPA task force. Alice, can you call the vote?
Yeah, do we have a second?
I'll second. This is Geyer-Smith.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye, the motion passes. All right, the motion passes.
Okay. Next, second, having established that each member's voice be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures. The fact that we're meeting electronically, what type of electronic communications is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the task force to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the task force and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting link on the track a nomination page of the SSPA website at https://www.fairfaxcounty.gov/planning-amendments/track-nomination, or by calling 1-408-418-9388 TTY 711 and entering access code 129-203-0777. It is so moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, the motion passes.
Thank you. Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda must address the emergency itself on the agenda, must address the emergency itself, are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government, and/or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of the Mason District SSPA Task Force's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you, Alice. I'll get the virtual gavel back and we'll start on the agenda. So the first item on our agenda is a follow-up from our first meeting and where the task force voted, I believe it was 11-1-1, to move the First Christian Church nomination to the work program. We agreed that we would take some time to, given the complexity and the amount of testimony we heard, to consider what conditions, considerations, whatever the word might be, that we wanted to attach to that. We had a couple of versions of that suggested. We've had one that I submitted that is open for discussion tonight. Others have been submitted. I thank Jeff and I think it was Donna for also trying to address these matters in an important way, particularly the stormwater issue. But both have agreed to withdraw their suggestions. So we have the draft task force explanation/comments before us that was circulated to task force members earlier. To try to make this quick, I'll make a motion that we include those in our communication with the Planning Commission, and we can then open the thing up to amendment.
Excuse me?
Karen?
Can I see a final version of it? Because I could not find it. I looked and looked and all I saw was email and then another summary of it. Can somebody share that on the screen?
Michael, did you send that out to everyone earlier today?
It went out. Jen sent it out to the task force on Monday, and Karen, I think I forwarded you a copy today.
You did, but there was one amendment and then there was another summary underneath it with just like 4 real simple bullets, and I don't know which one is the final.
Which one is the last one?
Okay.
So there is.
If I can share my screen, I can put that up, or if you want, we can email that around and come back to this at the end of the meeting. What would
Just share screen? I'm fine.
share screen?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the button for sharing the screen?
So Marty, the button you'll see 3 buttons: the mute, unmute, the start and stop my video, and then the next one over. It's called share content. It's a box with an arrow pointing upwards.
Right.
So if you click
Mine says open system preferences. That's what mine, the box with the arrow pointing up says open system preferences.
So when you click on, are you not seeing other apps that allow you to?
Chat, more options. I don't think they have a share. None of the buttons on the bottom open up a share screen option.
Marty, if you'd like, you can email the document that you have to Michael, and then Mike.
I'm pulling it up now.
Okay. Michael, I have one that I'll send you quickly that I formatted with a little bit bigger type, maybe easier to read.
Okay.
Okay, let me just send that to you quickly. Document.
Is this the one that has points A, B, C, and D in it?
Yeah, yes, ABC and yes. And just for some confusion, there's two, the document contains two elements, both the explanatory content up front, which was what the document Michael sent around was longer, and then the 4 shorter bullets at the bottom with the language that recommended for inclusion. Michael, did you get that?
I did. I'm pulling it up right now for you guys.
And Marty and Mike, I wanted to recognize that Dave Nguyen has joined us. So just wanted to check. Dave, can you hear us?
Dave, can you hear us? Can you just tell us
Yes,
where you're calling from?
I can hear you all.
Thank you. Bill, are you with us, Bill Likos?
Yes, I'm on now.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. And Graham, if you wouldn't mind, can you give me presenting capabilities? Perfect.
Okay.
All right. Can everyone see the screen now?
Okay. So these are this is the document that has the explanation comments, which is how it's described in the voting document. And again, I will move that we include those in our communication with the Planning Commission. If we get a second to that, we can then open this document up for amendment.
Second.
Okay. Anyone have any amendments to offer to the document?
Yeah, I have an issue with the requiring all stormwater to flow the other way because that may not physically be possible. There's stormwater that's coming off of there now. I don't know how they might. I don't know. It's Zone's job to do. That is zoning's job to do.
Again, there's very little stormwater management, to my understanding, on the site now.
I understand that, but there's water that runs off now, period. And if you include that language, that means all water that runs off cannot go into that stormwater system now, and that is not tenable.
Right. It's my understanding that a developer would have to manage all the water that runs off the site would have to be managed by the developer, whether it is or isn't now.
I understand that, and that's what is not. I don't think that's our job.
So if I may, Marty, interject here for just a second. I think it's important to remind the task force and the public at this point that the recommendations that you all put forth in this document will go to the Planning Commission and be considered, but it may not necessarily be incorporated completely as written into the authorization of a plan amendment. So the language doesn't need to be, the specific details of the language, while it's important, will certainly inform staff's study if this nomination moves forward onto the work program, but it may not carry forward verbatim how it's written.
Right, to kind of follow up on on Ms. Geyer-Smith's point, that many of these points, while community concerns, appear to be very overreaching on the basis of what we as a task force should be doing. And the approval that we've basically already given to them means that we're now trusting the other parts of the county government to do their job to look out for these common interest or community interest items. The one point I did really like, though, was the D, the plan amendment shall set a number of residential units at a max, because that thing is a little bit more up in the air.
Well, I think, I mean, those points are both the points Michael made and the points that Dave Robert are well taken. Again, in the explanatory document I sent around, I thought this was, in my view, that the task force should take this opportunity to share and reflect our understanding, our appreciation for the concerns raised in the hearing. You're right, many of these concerns were raised there. And it's, an opportunity to sort of put some some form and substance around those, and that's my intention here. As Michael says, these comments are advisory. They are part of the mix. It's my understanding that the staff will comment on our comments as in preparation for the Planning Commission hearing of this thing. So it was an effort to sort of try to give some form and substance to the concerns that we heard, and also to the issues that we discussed with the nominator during the, with both the attorney and Reverend Moore during our public hearing.
Mr. Chairman,
Bill?
thank you for your last comments. So that we're not here until almost 1 in the morning, might I request of my fellow task force members that if they have an opinion to offer on the language for us in the form of a motion, that they put their amendment in the form of a motion to see if it is seconded, and so that we can discuss their opinion, so that we are not here just sharing ideas back all night. In the case of Karen's comments, if she wishes to make a motion to amend the language before us, she certainly is entitled to do that. Awaiting a second, I will then reserve the opportunity to speak to her amendment.
I'm sorry, who's making that? I just.
That was Bill Likos.
Well, thank you, Bill. How do I do that? I'm sorry, I'm not a Roberts authority.
You make a motion to amend whatever part of the language before us is unacceptable to you, and then see if there's a second for that. In which case we would then.
It's a point of order. Is there currently a motion on consideration?
We have the motion has been made. The motion has been made to attach these comments to our communication with the Planning Commission. If we're having a discussion on that motion. Go ahead.
It's all 4 points at once, not on an up and down vote for each one individually.
Correct. It was all 4.
So as a point of order, if I make a motion to amend the second sentence of the first point to stormwater shall not increase the current stormwater management, the runoff or whatever, the current stormwater runoff into the Ravenwood Park or Lake Braddock community, that's all I'm asking. Should not increase.
Management system shall not. I would accept that. I'll accept that amendment.
It's not quite how it works.
Do we have a second for the amendment?
How does it work, Robert?
This is Barbara, second the amendment.
Is there amendment? The amendment was made to change the language that for the second sentence in point 1, stormwater, the amount of stormwater shall not, that enters the stormwater management system current shall not increase. Add shall not increase at the end of bullet 1. Is that, Karen,
that's happy for me, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I think, and I thank Karen for her succinct amendment, you are merely substituting shall not enter with shall not increase. So you're really changing one word in this. The author of the amendment has viewed it as a friendly amendment. It has been seconded. I move to accept, vote on the motion as presented.
Well, we already have a motion, so.
We are voting on the amendment, Mr.
Right, and then just to be for clarity, Bill, the language is not, we're not simply changing enter to increase. We are striking a few words, stormwater that enters the stormwater management system that currently serves or traverses shall not increase. Well, we are taking off shall not and insert that, changing enter to enters, and at the end including not increase.
I get it. With all due respect, it would be a hell of a lot simpler just to replace enter with shall not increase.
He's correct. Stormwater shall not increase. Yeah.
Stormwater can increase. It doesn't make. Oh, okay. Again.
I have a question before we go on. If I'm under the impression that these are recommendations and that Fairfax County will take them into consideration, but will be, I guess, doing their own analysis. So if this is just a recommendation, aren't we getting a little in the weeds with the exact wording?
Well, okay, it's a good point, but there's a motion on the table. The motion has been seconded. We have to take the yeas and nays on the motion. I move to take the yeas and nays. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. Are there additional amendments to the language?
I'm just wondering if, not, okay, so just a thing, do we want me to potentially share my screen? Because what I'm doing is I'm also taking some of these amendments so that we can see the changes that we're making as well.
It's going to get a little confusing. Let's see if are there any more amendments that people want to offer to this language? Task force members want to offer to the language? Hearing none, I call the previous question on the main motion, which would be to adopt these comments, subject as amended. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed,
Aye.
say nay.
Nay.
Ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. Okay. Michael, can you give us our screen back? Okay, moving on the agenda. The next item on the agenda, let's see, I have it here somewhere.
I think we're ready to jump into the presentations.
The first of the two nominations, the presentations by the county staff on the two nominations.
Yes, sir. I'm going to quickly share my screen once more and we'll get the ball rolling. All right, can everyone see my screen okay?
Mike, we're seeing a gray box, but it looks like it's going there. So,
can you see it now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone, task force members, public as well, to our official third meeting of the SSPA Mason District Task Force. These meetings, which I'll talk about here briefly, are to help us make a decision about the nominations that have been submitted as part of the site-specific plan amendment process. This process occurs biannually, or I'm sorry, not biannually, every 2 years for the North County and for the South County. And for the 2020 program, we're taking a look at 6 nominations in the Mason District. Really quickly, there is, for those who are joining us from the public, if you go to our track a nomination webpage, you can find a lot of the information. Sorry, my screen is automatically changing here. You can find a lot of the information that's listed here, including the meeting agenda, the task force roles, responsibilities, as well as previous presentations. So if you missed the first presentation on August 5th, you'll be able to see that information there. As a quick introduction to the screening phase. Let's see, I've still got my audio on there. The screening phase is the first portion of a broader planning process. It's here where we will consider each of the nominations and determine whether the nomination should move forward for further analysis. In other words, we're looking to see if the nomination should be added to the county's 2021 work program. And on that work program, what we'll do is take a closer look at each of these analyses. We'll flesh out some of the details that have come up in discussion here. That includes transportation analysis, stormwater analysis, as well as analysis for additional public facilities impacts. But for this meeting, for the series of meetings that we have scheduled between now and September, we really want to focus on a higher level question, which is which nominations should be added, and are these nominations contrary in any way to existing county policy? Is additional analysis in this instance needed to make a clear decision of whether this idea or this proposal should move forward? So we've received some feedback regarding two nominations, and as evident in the earlier discussions about the amendments for the First Christian Church, there are a lot of very detailed concerns that will likely come out through these discussions. Some of that detail we won't be able to explore or answer until staff has an opportunity to do that extra work and bring that information back to you. And that doesn't occur until the Board of Supervisors authorizes us to do so. So as a point of order, all of the nominations that you're hearing tonight, and we'll hear at our next meeting, are nominations. They are not plan amendments as of yet. That depends on both the Planning Commission and the board's decision. As many of you know already, we have 6 total nominations that are included for the Mason District. There are separate processes that are moving forward in both the Lee and Mount Vernon District, and they have a host of other nominations that have come forward. Tonight, we're going to focus on nomination 2 and 6. That includes 6152 Leesburg Pike, which is a single family property, as well as the Dar al-Hijra Islamic Center property, which is next door. So for our first nomination, we'll start with 6152 Leesburg Pike. This was submitted by the Gibson family, Priscilla and Alan Gibson. The property is located just south of the Seven Corners CVC, which is outlined in black on the map, and just north of the Bailey's Crossroads CVC, which also has an outline here. The property is across the street from a previous nomination that we considered on August 5th. This was the First Christian Church nomination, and it's also a part of a second nomination. This particular property has been nominated twice as part of the Dar al-Hijra Islamic Center proposal. So currently, it's a single family home that sits on approximately 1 acre, and you can see the property here, as well as the outline for the Islamic Center. To the north of the property and south of the property, we have some higher intensity multifamily uses. Behind the property to the east, we have some single family detached homes. And I believe the Vinewood community across the street to the west with some single family attached homes, as well as the First Christian Church nomination, which you can see here. Currently, the property is developed with 1 single family home, and it's planned for 3 to 4 dwelling units per acre. The proposal tonight that you all will be considering is to add an option to the comprehensive plan to allow for special population housing, including the elderly, at 5 to 8 dwelling units an acre. So it's considering the 3 to 4 with the move to 5 to 8 dwelling units per acre. One of our considerations is the provision of special populations that is consistent with plan goals. We've heard that, I think, from a number of nominations as well, and that's something that we do encourage. We are going to take a look at the property size. 1 acre for the number of units that are being proposed. We'll definitely need to take a closer look at how that might work. And with those simple considerations in mind, we do support adding this nomination to the 2021 work program for further analysis. We do encourage, if this is added to the work program, a cumulative assessment between this nomination, PC 19 MA 006 from Dar al-Hijra Islamic Center, and from First Christian Church, PC 19 MA 001. Right, and with that, I will turn it over to Mrs. Gibson. I think she is in her other room. Mrs. Gibson, can you hear us okay?
Hello. Yes, I can. Thank you, Mom.
No worries. I'll pull up a slide that you can speak to, and then whenever you're ready, just let me know if you want to switch to some of the images that you've shared.
Okay, thank you. And it may be helpful also to go back to the slide showing the property, since that's really the portion we're seeking to develop and build these residential units on the back portion. Right. All right. Well, good evening. I'm Priscilla Gibson, and together with my family, my husband Alan, sister Pamela, and my mother Charlotte, I appear before you this evening to discuss our family's nomination for our property. Beginning this evening's discussion, if I might, I would just like to take a brief moment to express and convey our family's appreciation to those in the county that have helped us with this daunting process and provided assistance. I'm sure further and certainly up to this point. There are many to thank. First and foremost, we would like to thank our Mason District Supervisor, Penny Gross, and her assistant that addresses the land use and development matters, Irvin Ariarte. And then with the county, certainly again, many individuals we've discussed matters with. Certainly our family is deeply indebted to Graham Owen and most especially to Michael Burton. So wanted to thank you. And we also thank the individual members of the task force for giving up your evenings to listen to our proposal. We appreciate that very much. So our family has been at this location for a good many years. I am actually a fourth generation on the property. But my grandfather built the home in the 20s. He completed it in 1929 and digging the foundation himself with a team of horses and the assistance of his uncle. So the property is slightly more than an acre, and it in concert with the county's desire to advance its major policy objectives to preserve open space and provide affordable housing, we come before you to seek your concurrence and consideration of two items in particular associated with our nomination to develop the property. It is actually the back portion. There are a lot of trees in the picture, but the garage is the smaller building on the left, and it would be the back portion of the property. Some of the trees that now exist, particularly towards the right-hand side, I suppose, may necessarily need to come down. But what we seek to do, in particular, my inspiration for this effort, and certainly in life, is my mother, Charlotte. She grew up on the property just as I did, coming through, and it is her desire now to come back to the property and a way in which to do this and accommodate is to provide cottage style cluster of cottage style residences that are designed specifically to facilitate mobility. And with this in mind, we have found a design. We've talked about several. One is that it would be no more than a 2-level townhome in a cluster. Our preference is for a 1-level cottage, and specifically that's her preference, to facilitate the mobility. Our intention is to design, in particular for my mother, but in doing so, to make it available to others who may have a similar need, requiring facilitation of mobility, but who want to remain in the area around the many amenities they have grown accustomed to, not just have a dwelling unit on a very smaller scale. So part of our concept is in designing these residences, whereas many of us, and perhaps even you, may have been faced with having to retrofit the home with grab bars or reconstructing the bathrooms in some way as a loved one ages. Our concept is to have these built into the home, so that will be designed specifically for it certainly would have more appeal to those fortunate enough to be getting ready to celebrate birthdays, let's say in the upper echelon above 60. But we also greatly admire the military and the service that the young men and women have provided to our country, and we staunchly support the Wounded Warrior Program. So it may be that this type of design or housing would facilitate someone who required facilitating their mobility, but who may not necessarily be at the upper tier age bracket. So I just wanted to express that. And I believe Michael has a little design that he will, to give you an idea, just to share with you something. But in order to accomplish any of this, we need two things. We are requesting a waiver of the county imposed requirement to build a service road at the front, at the Route 7, the property frontage. It's a requirement that was placed. This is, thank you, Michael. This is a design. It's 800 square feet, so it's compact. And certainly, should we be fortunate to be able to move forward with our plans, this evening, our family would reach out to the architect and artist that designed this, Mr. Brandon Ingram, and seek his assistance in ways in which to place the items and to best facilitate the mobility of an individual resident. There would be a maximum of 7 of these built, and depending on the setback requirements, and we do need to speak further, of course, with Casey and the building, we've had discussions, but in order to be within county compliance for placing these on the property. it could be that it's 3 units, cluster of 3, 4, 5, but it would definitely not exceed 7. We love the old family home, and we intend to keep that as sort of the 8th, the number 8. So it would be developing 7 or less. And we are truly more concerned with the quality and lifestyle it would provide to my mother and to others, more so than getting as many structures on the property as could be possibly fitted. We feel that's more a tribute to my grandfather who built our home. And we felt that this design complemented the vintage structure of our 1920s residence, and also provides the lifestyle and mobility that my mother is so looking forward to. And in doing so, perhaps others will find this amenable as well. So with respect to the requirement for the service road, that is something that has existed in the comprehensive plan for, I'm not really sure when, but certainly a good number of years. And the requirement is that if your property is developed, you must build a service road to Route 7. This no longer is truly an advantageous approach, either for us or for the county. To the left onto Rose Street, it would open onto a very heavily traveled and busy street, which is Rose Street. And there's a lot of pedestrian and vehicular traffic. To the right, it would just open onto the stop in the grass. The property to the next of us is it would stop in the grass, is owned by the Mosque. So we don't consider it to be an amenable addition to part of our plan. And I would like to just say some of the structures on our side of Route 7, which we are, if you're familiar with Peace Valley Lane and First Christian Church, so we are on the opposite side of Route 7. That's the same side as Seven Corners Shopping Center and the Jefferson Apartments, so on this side. And there are some service roads. The property next to us to the right, by the to the right, does not have a service road. The next property, well, I guess in this it's to the left, and this, thank you, to the north, does not have a service road. The next property to the north, heading towards Patrick Henry Drive and Seven Corners, which is the Jefferson Apartments, that does have a service road, as well as the property next to that, heading further, just which borders Patrick Henry, which are apartment housing. I believe it's Hollybrook. They do. Now, going in the other direction towards Bailey's Crossroads and across Rose Street, directly across from us is situated the Dar El Hijra Mosque. That does not have a service road. And then next to that, next to the mosque, are sort of the backyards that slope down from residences of Munson Hill. Those do not have a service road. And next beyond that, heading towards Bailey's, is the Water's Edge condominium. No service road there. But once you get beyond the Water's Edge, there's a tall business office that does have a service road, and then there are maybe 3 or 4 homes which are on a service road, and then you reach the Colmore area, Glen Carlin. On the opposite side of the street from us, from Patrick Henry Drive down to Colmore and Glen Carlin, I believe the only property that does not have a service road is the First Christian Church. And I suppose it just has to do with when properties were developed, but it doesn't seem amenable given today's pedestrian and vehicular traffic in the area. So we would just seek your consideration of the waiver on that. And the second item that we come before you for consideration this evening is to elevate the zoning status from its current designation, which is R3/4, to the next tier, which is R5/8. This keeps it in the residential, it's a residential 5/8 dwellings. So, and those are some of the things we seek your concurrence on, and we hope you find the residences we proposed of the style, while it's certainly nothing a done deal, but it is something that inspires us, and we hope you'll find it amenable as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gibson.
Thank you.
Marty, I'll turn it back over to you. I think you might be muted.
First thing we're going to do is open this up for any comments or questions from the task force members. Then we'll open it up to comments, questions from public. Any task force members have any comments or questions for Ms. Gibson?
I have a question, Mr.
Chair. Donna? I recognize Donna first. I'll get to everyone. Donna, you're muted. Donna, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Ms. Gibson, I have a question on the cottages. If these are for elderly and handicapped, they seem to have, I couldn't tell whether they were 4 or 5 steps to get up to the front porch. I was just wondering if that would be a problem.
Absolutely, and thank you. That's something we recognize as well, and certainly there would be modifications and adaptations. This was the architect drawing of the home, which was for the cottage for a different purpose, and certainly for to address the needs and facilitating mobility, that accommodation would necessarily need to be made. We totally agree, because this is what we want to do, is to facilitate lifestyle.
Okay. Good. Joshua, you had your hand up.
That's right. Mrs. Gibson, thank you for your presentation. I think I'm wondering, so your intention is to subdivide the property to allow for these 5 additional unit dwellings on there?
Well, I guess I'm a bit of a novice at this, and certainly will require more direction from developers, but if you're asking, would it, yes, I believe the question is, would it become a different parcel as opposed to the 1920s home that we're dwelling in now? My understanding is that while there would be certainly the close association, and due to the heritage of the property, that it would be its own separate enclave or cluster of cottage homes, or and I say that I know this is our preference and style to put on, but we'll certainly have to work with the county regarding the specific setbacks and dimensions. Yes, but it would be separate, but related.
Okay. Bill, did you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
One is to Michael. Michael, at the end of this, the last sentence of the preliminary staff recommendation, you say, while the subject property may not offer a logical planning area independently, an opportunity may exist for mutual consideration of affordable elderly housing between this nomination and the Dar al-Hajj's application. What specifically were you thinking of when you talked about mutual consideration?
Yeah, so when we put forth an amendment into the comprehensive plan, we will do so geographically. We will, whatever options that ultimately make it into the comprehensive plan can coexist for this particular property. In this instance, we have two nominations that have very similar recommendations to provide specialized housing. And so there may be an opportunity as we look at this area together during a work study to incorporate both ideas in some way. Now, we don't have any specific details on how that might happen, but we think it's certainly worth discussion considering that both nominators have brought this forward.
Thank you, Michael. My second question is for Ms. Gibson. Ms. Gibson, you heard earlier when we opened the meeting our discussions on First Christian Church across the street about stormwater runoff, particularly in terms of impacting the existing outflow to the Ravenswood Park and Lake Barcroft side of the stormwater management system. Can you speak to your plans to assure us that any redevelopment on your property will not impact the stormwater flowing into those two communities? And are you prepared to mitigate the development in such a way that it will not increase and in fact will divert any stormwater management to the other side of the process, the other side of the system?
Okay, we are certainly prepared to meet and address the county and residents' concern in this regard. I'm not as familiar with what specifically would need to be done. I can say that currently there exists a VDOT right-of-way for the runoff. It runs the entire length of Rose Street from Route 7 down to Munson Hill. There is like a little sort of gully, and I'm sure the developers and the county officials would see that this is addressed, and we will work with them. I'm not familiar specifically what would need to be done, but we certainly would work with county officials and the, I imagine would it be VDOT because they do have a little gully right of way currently along Rose. I'm sure there would be.
That, Mr. Chairman, I'll close and make a note that I would like to at the conclusion of
Thank you, Bill.
that we introduce some language similar to First Christian Church for the stormwater runoff does not.
Right. Bill, I have you. You're being shown as participating from 2 locations. We're getting a little bit of feedback loop. Just, can we mute Bill, please, for the moment? All right. Any other task force members with comments or questions before Alice?
Yeah, Ms. Gibson, just a quick question on parking. Do you guys have any idea on how parking will be managed? Will it just be street parking? Will there be driveways, etc.?
We do plan, and that is certainly something that needs to be discussed further with not only with developers, but also with the county in terms of requirements, setbacks. But we would plan for there to be, as envisioned now, and someone may have a better idea, but for there to be an entry from Rose Street, which would proceed in sort of a circular or horseshoe type design around the cluster. That's as envisioned now. And different options for parking have been tossed around. One is in front of the, as you come around the circular drive, that would afford some parking. There would have to be sufficient space. And then perhaps in areas closer to Rose Street, there would be extra space parking. But because this is, the whole concept is with the mobility in mind, we've also discussed having in between the cottages sort of pergola gazebo type structures, which would serve as carports and provide a little bit of space, but yet connect the cottage clusters. And certainly someone who's more of an artist or a developer may have a better idea, but those do need to be discussed further. And with the small number of, not only for the residents or the would-be residents, but for potential guests, or if there were to be a delivery or, along this nature. But we do plan for parking in that area, not on the street. And in fact, right now, there's only parking allowed on the other side of Rose Street, the side that will be closest to the mosque. Right now, actually, there is no parking allowed on the Rose Street, the side that we were proposing to develop.
Thank you.
This is Clara. Just in response, if I may, the zoning ordinance will require off-street parking, meaning it would need to be a part of the development on the property, and that depends on off-street. So there would be requirements that they provide for parking in the development off the street. Just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Ms. Gibson, thank you for your presentation. I also want to thank you for, I'm sorry, I'm just recognize myself for some comments. I'll recognize you, Jeff. I'll get back to you. Just want to thank you for your presentation. Couple of comments. I want to thank you for putting me in the upper echelon age bracket. I've never quite been described that way, but I really like it, so I'm gonna use it going forward. I do also like the idea of the cottage environment for seniors. There's a couple of small developments like that in our area, and they are quite attractive. And I think generally allow seniors to retain, live in a very dignified way, but in a way that meets their needs. Let me just before I recognize you, just mention that Penny Gross has joined us. Welcome, Penny. Good to see you. And Jeff, if you have questions for Ms. Gibson.
Yeah, hopefully brief ones. You had mentioned that this is for Priscilla. This might be for staff. This could be either age restricted or for disabled veterans. And last week we had talked about how if it was going to be age restricted, it has to be age restricted. Was that because of the funding? So I guess this is specifically for staff. Is that because of the funding that was going for First Christian Church? I mean, how does this work that it could be there's wiggle room here for Miss Gibson's property?
So it's not necessarily tied to funding, but depending on what types of restrictions or what type of housing she would like to provide on the property, there will be zoning regulations that she will need to comply with in order to make that happen. So whether it's elderly housing or whether it's housing for persons with special needs, it's not necessarily tied to funding directly, but she will have to meet some of the standards.
Okay, so right now, so this is back to Ms. Gibson. So you're so right now your application is for either of those scenarios?
Yes, the main reason is because our focus is on designing something that provides and enriches the lives of in particular my mother and other upper echelon type residents. We wouldn't want to overlook or preclude those who truly who may truly have a need and may be intrigued by this type of design, merely because they weren't at 60 or above. If they had a need, because to find this type of accommodation or residence, which factors in ahead of time the mobility and the ease of movement, that may be something that they were looking for regardless of their age. So I just wanted to note that. But of course, this design would probably have more appeal towards those that are 60 or above.
So if I could just drill in a little bit more. So are you just saying that this is how you're designing it, or are you saying this is what you want? This is your application for the plan is to be supportive housing for those two populations?
Yes, I feel that's exactly right, Jeff.
Okay.
Mr. Longo, we wouldn't want to preclude. We won't want to preclude someone who has a need who hasn't reached the age that many places consider. And
okay, I mean, just to flip that on its head a little bit, so someone from the general population that doesn't meet those needs potentially wouldn't be able to live in your housing.
Well, the thing is, because it would be such a limited commodity, you're really speaking of anywhere from 3 to 7 maximum residences. Because the need and desire is so great in our area for, with the aging population or those having mobility needs, that, I just feel it is a limited commodity, and we would consider the request of those who would like to be there.
Okay.
And also, I did want to say, I don't know anything about the funding. I'd like to find out more about it. If I don't know anything about the funding. If someone wants to bring some this way, that's fine.
One other question. Is this for attached or detached housing?
Okay, the cottages on the surface are designed as 800 square feet cottages. The concept for having a cluster of those could be, and that has to be discussed a little bit more, and certainly with the county, to to join them in some way, sort of a breezeway that could serve as a carport and facilitate the entry. So while, yes, each of these cottages could stand on their own as an 800 square foot, but yet, depending on the visual and the constraints and setbacks of, we envision a cluster, perhaps joined by breezeway or pergola, that provides parking capability, a carport.
Okay.
Barbara? You're on mute.
Yeah. Thank you, Marty, for recognizing me. Thank you, Ms. Gibson, for your presentation. Thank you for being here. I had a question regarding accessibility for like ambulances or other kinds of service, given that the population that you're talking about seems to be those that might need extra medical assistance or care on a regular basis. Have you taken that kind of access into consideration in your plan?
And we certainly will be for that. And I agree. I can tell you, in my own experience, living at the house that opens up, we have the two driveways that open onto Route 7 as well as the Rose Street. And numerous times over the course of the past years, we have had to call upon the very apt and admirable medical services and of the county, and the fire department has responded. And actually, our own home, usually they will park on Rose Street, just outside our side driveway, and on occasion they have on Route 7 outside, and then bring the stretchers in and the medical equipment and in. I mean, that has been my experience. We will certainly try to certainly would have this as a consideration, and I look forward to talking with county officials and developers and those as a way to best accommodate this.
And again, if it's helpful to the task force to know that the fire marshal is one of the reviewers of zoning cases, and they ensure that they have the access that they need.
Okay, we would look forward to working with the fire marshal then.
Other questions from task force members, comments?
If I may, Marty?
Robert?
Yeah, so Mrs. Gibson, what I'm trying to understand a little bit, and I'll preface this with, you actually in 2016 attempted to sell the lot with a close friend of mine, Miss Gillian. She and I were agents together for a very long time. And so I understand that families change and needs can change over time. Can you just kind of help me understand a little bit what changed from your decision in 2016 to list it for sale at 2.4 million and now the plan to redevelop?
Well, yes, actually. And Kathy is very lovely and very helpful, and we enjoyed many conversations. And I must say, we did that. I'm sure Kathy wouldn't appreciate it, but she was so lovely. We did work together, enjoyed many times. We did that more out of curiosity, if you will, to see what, because our family had been there. And you're absolutely right. The dynamics change in a family, and the health changes in a family, and the needs. So we had, it was really more for curiosity, and she gave us very fine advice.
So as we've talked about several different times, the setbacks seem to be the one snag kind of in this general plan, unless we create a cluster where more than one or wall are actually connected to the units. Otherwise, we're not going to have the space to either side. But what I'm trying to understand is, what is holding you back from redeveloping the property with the stated ideas and dreams that you have with just 3 additional units right now, which would already be in line with the zoning on your property?
It seems to me, because then actually Kathy and I had gone over that, I think the zoning is R3/4, but it seems that I think the development could just be the 3 lots or 3 homes on the acre. Because this is being done now, considered with my mother in mind, and we even 1 or 2 homes in the back, we really don't want to place her in the back. It's just more amenable to have a little cluster, as small as that may be. And
Okay.
it's our understanding that the dynamics would be a little bit different and moving to the residential 5/8. But I also would like to say many times when we came to the county and discussed matters with numerous county officials, it was we were apprised that regardless if we had no plans for the back, we happen to have plans, but if we didn't, our family would be certainly well within its own realm and its rights as residents to request the rezoning, given that there's a multitude of development all around us over the years. So.
And my last question, we kind of touched on this a little bit and not, I think, gotten down to an exact answer. These cluster of homes, are they intended to be managed as rentals, or are they going to be sold as fee simple or HOA property? And if there's any confusion on what that means, I can get into that a little bit. Is there going to be, for example, the family managing the property, or and basically the residents are renters, or is someone going to develop, build, and then sell it to where someone actually owns it?
Well, you certainly are much more knowledgeable about this in the process, I suppose, over time. Right now, and perhaps we'd hear other suggestions for consideration, but right now, the thought is that there would be residents in there. The people, would live there. There would be a close association because, of course, it has been our family property and my grandfather's legacy. And of course, because my mother would be one of the residents there, in a very intimate cluster and gathering, there would be many times where we may get together, perhaps, barbecues, crab feasts, relaxing on the veranda. So there would be an association, but but it is a separate enclave.
Right. If I could say something here, I appreciate the questions you've asked, Robert, and Ms. Gibson. We seem to have lost you a bit. I don't know if we lost Ms. Gibson on the video feed. We can figure that out. But it seems clear to me that Ms. Gibson has a vision for what she'd like to do with her property. There are a host of questions that we have raised that are important questions and critical questions, but that would be answered if she were to move forward and partner with a developer or a nonprofit or whatever however she chose to move forward on the site. So unless there are any further critical questions or comments from task force members, I'd like to open it up for public comment. At this time, Graham, do we have any public comment requests?
We do. So we have 2 speakers so far. Just members of the public, if you would like to speak on this or the future item, if you're calling in by phone, you should hit *3 on your dial pad. That'll let us know that you want to speak. And if you're on the video interface, just raise your hand by opening the participants panel, and the little hand is in the bottom right-hand corner. So toggle that on and we'll know that you want to speak. So the first member of the public is calling in from phone. The phone number, the first 6 digits are 703-533. I'm going to unmute this caller.
Caller, are you with us? Hello? There's someone on the line? Graham, let's move on to the next one. We'll come back.
Next is Matthew. Matthew, can you hear us?
Yes,
Matthew,
can you hear me?
Matthew, welcome. Please go ahead. Please, and I just before everyone who, if you could try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or under, that would be very helpful. Thanks. Go ahead, Matthew.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. I don't know, since Ms. Gibson, oh, maybe she's back. My first question, my name is Matthew Sage. I'm actually a president of the Lee Boulevard Heights Citizens Association. We are in the property to the north and west of the Gibson property and the Dal Hijra Islamic Center. So obviously we are very interested in what's going on with these two properties. My first question is really kind of a synergy question. Ms. Gibson, can you confirm, is your project and property, is this running separate but parallel completely to the Islamic Center's work, or is there any, I know eventually there'll be some design considerations working in tandem, but are you working in tandem with the Islamic Center currently in any way, shape, or form?
Hello? Hello?
Hello, we hear you.
Okay, hello. I'm sorry. I hope everyone doesn't think I hung up on you. The power went out on the laptop, so we just graciously switched one out. And I'm sorry, I caught the tail end of the conversation, which I believe was, am I working?
Ms. Gibson, the question is whether whether for this proposal you are working in concert with or in consultation with the mosque, there's an overlap, obviously an overlap in proposal here.
Right. No, not for this proposal. This was our family's own proposal for the land.
Okay, thank you. Matthew, your second question?
Second question would be, if I read the application correctly, the intent was to create up to 8 units on the site and maintain existing residents on the site?
The 8th unit would be the existing home, the 1920s Dutch colonial farmhouse in which I currently reside that my grandfather built. So the development would only consist of up to a cluster of 7, and probably given the dynamics of the land and the county setback requirements, probably far fewer.
And would the intent be to build some in the front, some closer to Route 7, and then some closer to Munson Hill, or all toward Munson Hill, or what's the thinking?
No, just only the back, everything to the front, as our nomination would remain the same. It's just the back of the property, which heads down Rosary.
Well, then my third and last comment on this would be, right now we have a lot of congestion that happens Munson Hill Road right behind that property. And I think the Islamic Center property dovetails behind yours as well. It's kind of the dog leg there, if I remember correctly. Your property doesn't extend all the way to Munson Hill. But
no, that's correct. There are 3 homes in the back situated along Munson Hill.
I would just say as a note for future design considerations that it's very congested back there. There's a bottleneck that happens because right now there is street parking on both sides of Munson Hill, and there's a turn onto Olin Drive. Right now, especially on Fridays, when the mosque lets out, there's a huge bottleneck there, and no cars, no vehicular traffic can get through that location. So if there's a way to work the design such that we can accommodate or widen the road or limit parking in that area, we would strongly recommend doing that to alleviate that. Because right now, buses and emergency vehicles cannot get through there on Friday afternoons. And that's what I would say.
Matthew, thank you.
Matthew, thank you so much. That's true. And that was one reason why on Rose Street, the parking was just limited to the opposite side to allow for vehicular traffic. It was a huge problem on Rose Street, and I'm very familiar with the narrow turns down there. I would say, and of course, I'm very familiar with the sessions and the activity, which, as you say, on Fridays and also on Thursdays tend to be very busy areas and very busy days for the mosque. I will say that over the course of time, they provide guards, either their own guards or in the form of off-duty policemen, often park in our side driveway on Rose Street. And I will say, even with all the pedestrian and vehicular traffic, I have, they're very accommodating. If I need to get out on the side, they're very helpful with that to stop traffic. And that's why we envision them being able to accommodate and do the same, offer the same to the development in the back.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Ms. Gibson. If I could ask the public commenters, please address your comments to the task force. If appropriate, we'll raise those questions with Ms. Gibson in our discussion around our motion. Graham, are there others who would like to comment?
The caller, I've been trying to communicate with the caller who's on the phone, and we're going to try again. Caller, if you can, just make sure that you're unmuted on your own phone, and I'm going to unmute you now in our system just to make sure that we can establish a connection. So can you hear us now? Carol that I'm talking to, can you hear us?
All right, let's move on. Let me just close the public. Are there other members of the public who wish to comment? Graham? No. Let's close the public comment period and move to our decision. For purposes, I will offer a motion and then we can debate the motion or as we move forward. But I will move that the nomination be added to the work program with a very strong and perhaps early suggestion that this be combined with the mosque nomination. There's overlapping plots here, and that try to come up with a single proposal that encompasses all of the properties. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Is there discussion on the motion?
Having not heard the mosque.
Suggestion.
So,
oh, sorry.
Discussion on it. Was just task force member, just raise your hand so I can recognize you. Jeff?
Sorry, in regards to the suggestion that it be, I don't know if we need to combine, suggest that they be combined, but they need to be coordinated. And I think that was one of the staff recommendations, that there needs to be.
I'll accept that. I'll accept the language change as a friendly amendment.
This is Dave. I want to understand what the meaning of coordination, if that can be clarified by the staff. Does that mean that we need to look at different proposal and then see whether there's a commonality to help?
Dave, I think in this, Jeff, I think in this instance there we have, as people have seen on the maps, we have two nominations, one within another. Ms. Gibson's nomination is within the nomination submitted by the mosque. The mosque nomination includes Ms. Gibson's property, which it does not currently control or own. And they are, many of the goals of the nominations are the same, and we'll have a different discussion about that when we hear the mosque nomination. And the motion is only to suggest that have competing nominations, that if possible, the two nominators try to coordinate and come with a single nomination for the property. Barbara?
I was just wondering if it would be possible to wait to make a decision on this one until we've heard the other proposal as well?
We'll make a motion to that effect. You're taking a substitute to my motion.
I would argue that I would not to go forward with a decision at this time. Instead,
Is your motion to postpone our decision until we have the public presentation hearing on the Mosque nomination?
yes.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Is there discussion on the motion? In favor of the motion?
Pardon me, Mr. Machowski?
Yes.
I suppose the task force wants to combine these. I would just like to say, as the homeowner, what the mosque proposed has nothing to do with what our families seek.
And that is an issue which we will discuss. I think the motion on the table, Ms. Gibson, is just to postpone our decision here until we hear the nomination from the mosque, and we can, if they are overlapping properties, we can discuss them to some degree.
Mr. Machowski, let me interject really quickly, just for clarity. This is not to combine the nominations.
Right.
This is to allow us to consider them together. So if both nominations move to the work program, when we study this, we will do so in tandem.
Correct. Any more discussion on Barbara's motion?
So, and just going back on Ms. Burgess' motion, that I do believe it is in our prudent interest to delay a decision on this one until we've heard the full of the mosque scenario, because any decision in which we're combining or overlapping them is detrimental when we haven't heard the other half of the information.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Now, under Robert's rules, we're voting on the substitute motion from Barbara Burgess. All those supporting the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Now that the substitute becomes the main motion, the motion is to defer action on this until after the mosque. Say aye.
Aye.
Say nay. The ayes have it. Okay, so further the decision of your nomination, and now we're going to move to hear the mosque's nomination. Michael, you want to start that up?
And while Michael is bringing that up, I just wanted to, as a friendly reminder to everybody, that if you're not speaking on the task force, please, just to make sure that we're getting as little interference as possible, please make sure that you're muted. If you're muted, your mute button will be red, and if you're speaking and so people can hear you, then your mute button will be black. So you'll be unmuted then. So, much better. Thank you.
All right, perfect. That might have been me there, Graham. Sorry about that. So we'll jump into our second nomination. This is PC 19-MA-006, submitted by the Dar al-Hijra Islamic Center. The Islamic Center's property is at the address of 3159 Rose Street, but it also includes 8 other parcels. That's 6152 and 6160 Leesburg Pike. That also includes 6105, 6107, 6109, 611, 6111, 6113, 6115, and 6117 Munson Hill Road, which are the properties that you see here to the north. The property is, or the subject area is a total of approximately 7.5 acres. As you can see here, it includes the Gibson property, which is about 1 acre of that. Similar context, so I won't go into that in terms of the surrounding community. Currently, the subject area is developed with the Islamic Center as well as single-family detached homes. All of the properties are planned between 2 to 3 dwelling units an acre and 3 to 4 dwelling units an acre. Properties along Munson Hill Road are at the 2 to 3, and the properties along Leesburg Pike are at the 3 to 4 dwelling units an acre. As you have heard, the Islamic Center nomination proposes to add an option to the comprehensive plan to allow for a community center with potential expansion of their place of worship. Additional uses could include up to 25 units of senior housing with supporting retail. And that total FAR, I believe, is around 160,000 square feet. The FAR is around 0.5 FAR, and that encompasses about 160,000 square feet. Some similar considerations. One of the things that might be of interest to the community and to this task force is to consider how the existing programming of the mosque could work better within this subject property, both existing and future programming with the additional space. We are paying close attention to transitions in height and scale, as well as other compatibility issues. We've discussed this at length with our previous nominations at the First Christian Church as well, as they're adjacent to some of the lower intensity residential uses. This is something that we'll pay close attention to if this moves forward onto the work program. Similar to the Gibson's property, the comprehensive plan does encourage the provision of housing for special populations. That's something that we seek to encourage. We want to make sure that it's done in the as best a way as possible. So that's something that we do support. With those considerations, we do support moving this nomination on to the 2021 work program for further analysis. Likewise, we expect to assess this nomination alongside the Gibson's nomination, as well as the First Christian Church, given their proximity. And that's all I have. And from there, I will turn it over to, I think David Gill is providing the presentation. And if you'll give me a second, David, I'll pull that up for you.
Sure. And while you're pulling it up, I just take a second to introduce myself, Michael. My name's David Gill. I'm a land use attorney with the law firm Wire Gill. And with me tonight also is Saif Rahman from the Mosque, here to talk a little bit about some of our thoughts. And you had a lot of great, robust discussion, and really appreciated hearing that feedback from the previous discussion on Ms. Gibson's plan. We are, just as a reminder, what we're really talking about here tonight is just the chance to roll up our sleeves and work with the community to see if we can line up the goals of the mosque with some of the concerns that we've already heard identified by the community. We certainly want to be a good community partner. That's always been our goal with the mosque, and always been our goal is to be part of this community moving forward. We spent a lot of time and effort trying to be a good neighbor and want to be able to continue that partnership in the future. I'll turn it over to Saif right now to walk through a little bit about the history and why we're really here tonight. And just by final clarification, if Ms. Gibson's application moves forward, we as the Mosque don't anticipate needing any senior housing as part of this nomination. So the retail component and the 25 senior housing component, we really don't see that as part of this nomination, given her efforts. I think what we would really like to focus on tonight is on a potential community center for the mosque and a minor expansion of the existing mosque. With that, I'll turn it over to Saif to talk a little bit about the current state of the mosque and its members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I appreciate all your work. I attended the last session, I think, until 11:45 or so. So I really appreciate everyone's efforts in making sure things move forward for our community. So I'm here to talk about a little bit of the history and talk about what we're kind of envisioning as we move forward for our larger community. Darul Hijra Islamic Center was established in 1983. We've been at that property in Rose Street for the better part of 35 years. And it started at that small house. Michael, if we can move to the next slide. So we started at that house. It was a few members who were immigrants who came to the community, decided that they needed a gathering place to come together. And 3159 Rose Street was born at that time as the Darul Hijra Islamic Center. Dar al-Hijra refers to essentially the place of migration. So essentially, when the Prophet Muhammad moved from Mecca to Medina, he made Medina his home. Similarly, those immigrants who moved from wherever they moved to the United States, they made Fairfax County their home, and that's the intent of the understanding of what that means. So 1992, the few immigrant families are no longer few. We start to grow. Kids are now first and second generation Americans. The new building is inaugurated and accommodates prayer services, youth activities, and trainings. And just a little bit of a tidbit for those of you that don't know, the person who actually ended up building the mosque is the father of the model Gigi Hadid, Hadid Construction. It was him that actually ended up building the building that currently exists there. He was the contractor. In 1995, Dar al-Hijra Social Services is born to begin by distributing zakah, which is the charity paid by Muslims to community members in need. The yearly budget at that time was about $50,000. Now, I know that the mosque has not always been the best of neighbors to our neighbors in the beginning. We have made a conscious effort to make a difference in the community. Next slide, please. As we move forward and we saw that need, things began to change. After September 11th, Dar al-Hidra's leadership realized that it wasn't enough to be a prayer space for just Muslims, but the need to serve the larger community was just as important. So in 2005, we revamped our social services. We now serve any community member in need, regardless of faith or background. In 2005, the budget of social services $125,000, which encompasses about 20% of the overall budget of the mosque at that time. Then in 2010, we begin to offer literacy courses for non-English speakers of all faiths, rent assistance programs, food bank is created, and programming to educate State Department and DoD folks on cultural sensitivity. So as we can see, the mosque is beginning to grow and become more of a community center in 2010. Next slide, please. In 2015, Dar al-Hijra not only attracts new immigrants to our country, but third-generation American Muslims. Social services now has become big enough to occupy the old house on the property. And what I understand is that actually also was a relative of Miss Gibson's who used to own that property also. In 2018, Dar al-Hijra teams up with the Literacy Council of Northern Virginia to offer literacy classes, Empowered Women International to offer small business training. We've graduated well over 150 women of all faiths and backgrounds from the Colmore community and actually helped them with a small business support so they can start their own small businesses. And also the social service budget is now $350,000 in rent assistance, clinic, food bank, etc. We've come to 2020. Dar al-Hijra now is a real community center. Yes, we continue to hold prayer services on Fridays. Ms. Gibson mentioned Thursday as a busy day, and that's because Thursday morning, 500 families from the Colmore and Bailey's area that are of all faiths and backgrounds actually come visit our food bank. And every last Thursday of the month, we actually are the ones doing the cooking in-house for the First Christian Church Safe Haven program. It's a program that we've teamed up with. Dar al-Hijra has also become a member of the board of the Colmore Clinic that is housed in the First Christian Church. But we also have a very small dental clinic that is open to the needs of the larger community that is happening every other weekend. We've also served more than 25,000 meals since the start of COVID, and 5,000 families have received staple foods. And we've offered to be a COVID testing site to the county health department and have been working with the governor on rent relief and criminal justice reform issues. So we've been growing as a community, but we're also realizing the importance of serving the larger community and being an important member of that community to be in service. Next slide, please. So as we look to the future, we thought that the next thing we need to do was to look at providing a space for the larger community. One thing we've identified is there is not a nice community center space that has community meeting rooms, that has an indoor pool maybe, some basketball courts, and community meeting space generally in the area. So we felt that it would be a good idea that would be what we would try to work towards. And in the process of doing so over the years, Darul Hijra has actually acquired many of the properties, or has interest with many of the properties that are surrounding the mosque. We own the property that is immediately adjacent to Ms. Gibson's property on the backside with the Jefferson. We also own two of the properties that are on the other side of Ms. Gibson's property, the three houses that I think someone had spoken about at the end. And we also have interest in three of the properties that are on the other side of Rose Street on Munson Hill. So we've been trying to basically work towards a larger plan for the community. We've also purchased an old journal building off of Edsel Road and created a small community center and school there so that we can accommodate the growing Muslim community. But our intent for this idea in 2030 and beyond is to create a larger community center for the overall community, not just for the Muslim community. This would serve the essentially Baileys and Culmore areas. Next slide, please. So this is a very basic concept. And again, the idea that Ms. Gibb, I've been talking to Priscilla for the last week or 10 days or so for the nominations. This is nowhere near, this is just an idea that we kind of threw together. You know, as I was thinking through with some of our board members as to Ms. Gibson's nomination, we thought about the idea of figuring out a way to include some sort of housing for the cottage ideas along Munson Hill Road to create a smooth transition, which is a possibility. I feel that there is a possibility for us to work with Ms. Gibson and her family and try to figure out how we can create a community function, essentially, that serves the larger community. What you see here essentially would kind of reroute traffic over to Olin Drive and take it out to Leesburg Pike, and you know, create you know, more green space in the area, as well as you know, basically reroute traffic on that bend that happens right now, which is you know, Mr. Sage mentioned, creates some sort of a congestion. You know, we would also anticipate widening Munson Hill Road to make it more walkable with sidewalks and obviously larger area, and making Olin Drive the same way. So again, this is just a concept. This is just an idea. You know, the mosque is not thinking about any rezoning applications right now. We are still well into, I mean, this is probably well into the future, but we wanted to put this out there as our future planning as we grow as a community and think how we can serve the larger community. Thank you very much for your time this evening, and I look forward to answering any questions or concerns that people may have.
David and Saif, thank you for your presentation. Are there task force members with comments or questions before we move to the public comment? Jan Keys.
In your nomination write-up, you mentioned several times retail. Is that something you're still considering? And if so, what do you imagine that looking like?
So we actually wrote that in there essentially because of a specific zoning category that we were looking at. I don't think retail would be, we were trying to keep the essentially the plan as open as possible so that the community, we wouldn't have a problem when we zone the community center, you know, 5, 10, 20 years down the line. There's no, right now, none of the plans include any sort of retail. We had just written it in there just to keep options open.
Okay, thank you.
Ed Feig.
Yeah, hi. That was actually my question about the retail and that, because you plug that into a community that's there, and I can just kind of see sort of a hodgepodge of a couple of mom and pop shops in it. And it just needs to be in the character of the neighborhood and what they're trying to do. But I see where you're coming from right now, so no problem with that. The other thing is, I'm just curious as to the adjoining neighborhood. We're no doubt going to hear from that, but if you can kind of just talk to us, have you done any outreach to the community that's adjacent there that knows that strip of houses would be probably disappear? Or how's that going to affect in terms of traffic and everything else behind it? And I've also noticed, because I took sort of a reconnaissance of that the other day, just so I can familiarize myself, and I went in the back, and there's a lot of cut-through traffic coming in from Route 50. And I'm wondering, if you open that up, how much more is going to come through that community from 50? Thank you.
So again, I mean, these are still pretty far out concepts. We haven't done any detailed engineering, as you probably may know. And we have started some community outreach to some of the houses in the area. We have not done enough yet. Actually, I read some of the public comment and immediately reached out to Mr. Sage, for example, of the Lee Boulevard Heights community. But we intend to actually do more outreach. This really came about because we saw this SSPA process happening, as we decided to put in a nomination as we're thinking for the future. But we would definitely start talking with the community more about how we move forward and what is best for the larger community. Because you know, we believe if you're not a good neighbor, which we intend to be, then you know the community is not going to want you. So the idea is that we want to be better serving of the community and reduce the strain of traffic, in particular in parking on the community.
And Safe, just building on that too, we absolutely want to be a good partner with our neighbors. And I think you put it right that this process, the SSPA process, gives us the tool to have that conversation with the community to make sure concerns are addressed. We certainly saw the comments from the community and want to roll up our sleeves and work with them as part of this. And I would imagine issues like cut through traffic are something we'd want to make sure get addressed as part of the nomination.
Other task force members? Anad?
Yes, I have a few comments and a couple of questions. Thank you, Seth. You said there are no community centers in the area. I just did a quick Google search, and less than 3 miles from your location, there are 2 community centers: Falls Church Community Center and James Lee Community Center. Just wanted to make you aware that there are centers less than 3 miles away from you. Not 1, but 2. The second thing, parking. Just doing a quick Google search, it says on a regular day there are 300 to 400 people coming to the mosque, and on Friday there are 4,000 people coming to the mosque. That's a whole lot of people, whole lot of cars. So how many parking spots are you thinking of putting it there? And it's already a huge, we heard in the previous presentation, people are parking everywhere on the street. So how many parking spots are you going to put there, and what's your plan to reduce the parking problem? And you said you own some of the properties. How many do you need to own more to implement your whole plan?
Thank you for the question. So I'm aware of the James Lee Center and Falls Church Center. I just want to keep you apprised that as Route 7 expands and the rapid bus transport comes, this would be a lot more accessible in terms of transportation directly off of Route 7 in the space that we're in. So yes, I'm aware of the other centers, but we would try to offer more activities and community meeting space than those centers offer. The closest large size center would be the Providence, which is up Route 50. You know, that's quite a distance from the center. I know it's a few miles, but you know, like for a kid, a few miles without a car is problematic, especially without direct bus access. Regarding parking, so you know, obviously, I think this plan, I think we're showing over 400 to 500 spots of parking. We have no doubt that parking is something that we want to address. We have worked with both the Church of Christ and the First Christian Church. We have agreements with both regarding parking, and have worked with them to make sure that we can continue to use their lots when we have a surge. The attendees have grown, but we also have a long-term strategic plan to create satellite centers to reduce the strain on the current building and community in terms of having people attend. So we would create smaller centers in different communities so that essentially people wouldn't necessarily congregate at the larger center. What we've done, it's not 4,000 people at one time, Mr. Gupta. What happens is we've created 5 different prayer services. That way, we're essentially moving people in and out of the center, and therefore you get less people per prayer for each prayer, essentially. So that way, and we're also enforcing HOV3 during Friday peak hours, so that we can encourage people to carpool. What was your last question?
Like you said, to build your whole plan, how many more properties?
Oh, how many more houses?
To acquire.
So I think we would still need to acquire, or we would need to work with the Gibson's property. And there's one other property that's on the corner of Munson Hill and Olin Drive that we would need to acquire.
Just a quick question, just a quick comment. Like right now, there are 4,000 people. Just doing a quick Google search. When you expand the, probably going to be more than 4,000, probably 6,000. Who knows how many? So I think problem is parking is going to be a huge problem. It is a huge problem already, and once you expand it, it's going to be a bigger problem.
Well, I mean, as I stated, what we're planning on doing is essentially creating, as part of our strategic planning, is creating smaller satellites for some of the prayers to reduce the strain on the community for the main prayer service. As you may be aware, the main prayer service for Muslims happens on a Friday afternoon versus a Sunday for Christian services. And, you know, that happens. What we've been doing is we actually pay almost $800, actually, no, I'm sorry, $1,800 every Friday to off-duty Fairfax County police officers to help with traffic flow. We've been doing that every Friday. During Ramadan, for example, we pay for a lot more officers to help with the traffic flow. Expanding the building essentially would just be for expanding services more than services to the community more than services to prayer. Our intent is to create other spaces for prayer, which we have started to do, for example, off of Edsel Road, which I mentioned with the Journal building, and we're looking for a space right now in Tyson's Corner that we were almost ready to sign a lease for until COVID struck. So our strategic plan is to reduce the strain on the current community and building by increasing locations and having people routed to those locations versus the main center. The intent of this application is not for the expansion as much as it is for the community center. That's the main intent of this application.
And we would absolutely work on managing parking. I think we've heard that loud and clear from everyone. That's a critical issue, and as both part of the SSPA process, which is still in front of us, and a potential implementation of zoning probably many years down the road, that would be the threshold we'd have to meet to make sure the community is satisfied that the parking program works.
Donna?
Yeah. Yeah, this might be a question for Fairfax County staff. When it was said that the previous nomination should be coordinated now with this nomination, what exactly does that mean, and how would it affect each of the nominations?
So the coordination, Mrs. Jacobson, would occur in the analysis that would take place on the work program. It doesn't commit either nomination to any decisions, particularly now in the screening phase. But any assessments that we make at this location, you would need to think about how they could either work together. Are there ways to incorporate both ideas within the same sort of subject area? Or is there a way that they could work in some way separately or independently from one another? A lot of those questions or those answers, I'm sorry, we won't have until we go through that process, that analysis.
Sure, and I'd like to add, in other cases where we've asked that developers work together, things that have come out of it might be consolidated access or one property giving access to another property, design considerations so that the design works well together. Those are the kinds of things that can be considered when you look at both together.
Other task force members with questions or comments? Let me just make a few before we open it up for the public input process. This is a pretty significant development proposal, certainly on par with what we discussed at our last meeting in the First Christian Church. I would caution task force members that all of these properties are just east on Route 7 from the Seven Corners area, in which a plan was adopted just a few years ago for that area that provided for up to 7 million square feet of development, including thousands and thousands of new residential properties. So there's enormous, and I know the staff recognizes that as they talked about doing an analysis of these nominations together with particular attention on some of the issues that it poses down the Route 7 corridor and into Seven Corners. I'm a little bit curious about a comment, David, I don't know if you were safe, if you made it about that if the Gibson proposal nomination went forward, that you would simply eliminate the affordable housing, the senior housing component of your nomination. Help me understand why one is a trade-off for the other.
Well, I think what we were saying was we would try to figure out a way to incorporate the ideas that Ms. Gibson was proposing. You know, as we were discussing, I've been talking with Ms. Gibson for the last week or 10 days and trying to understand what her family was kind of thinking about for the property. So we would try to find a way to maybe incorporate what they're trying to do in the larger plans. So that's the elimination would be not an elimination per se, but kind of a figuring out a way of how we trade it or work it together so that we can accommodate what they're trying to do. I know one of the big concerns that Ms. Gibson has is the old house that's currently on the property that was built by her grandfather. And we're even trying to creatively think of ways to work around that if they would be willing to work with us on it. And I think that at least we're having a conversation. So that's what that was intended for.
And safe, just to be clear, our nomination had 25 senior housing units in it. Your intent from the Mosque perspective is not to move forward with those at this time. Is that correct?
That's correct. The main intent is essentially to have the community center.
Okay. Fine. Are there any other comments or questions from the task force members before we open this up?
Yeah.
Jeff?
Yeah. Can you go back to the last? I know it's very early and it's a concept, but one of the last slides in the presentation showed a very preliminary concept. Before this slide.
I'm working on it, Jeff. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
It's a great looking black screen.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so I mean, so understanding that right now we're not considering this all gets complicated because right now we're just considering land use proposals, not necessarily specific development proposals, this is more of a development proposal. But thinking of, you know, this is kind of starts to gellify what your vision is for the land use. This doesn't really, help me understand that this seems to, this encompasses Miss Gibson's property, right?
So this was put together, that's correct. This was put together before we had any discussions with Miss Gibson or knew about, you know, exactly what their plan entailed. And I just threw this in there as a kind of a, like I said, pie in the sky type thing. We're nowhere near, you know, figuring out where this ends or how we actually plan this out. I just wanted an engineer to kind of, if we were to do something, what would we thinking about doing and how we kind of jig it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because one of the thoughts here was that it's just this recreation center. I mean, it definitely shows this you said as you're pivoting towards recreation center, but it shows absolutely no senior housing or supportive housing at all, and so
So this was done before. Yeah, this was done before we had. I started having conversations with Miss Gibson, and I'm happy to. I mean, again, this is so preliminary.
Yeah,
that
I
we're
get
happy
it.
to have those conversations and have the community discussions. Before obviously moving towards any finalization of any plans, because another consideration is. In one of the corners, there's currently a stormwater management pond that essentially is the detention pond for the whole neighborhood almost before that water goes down into the stream. So we'd have to figure. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff to figure out.
I don't think I want to insert this as formal language, but just mentioning it, how you have this arranged, it is such that it's facing Route 7 with parking in the back, which does generally go with our land use guidelines. But if we start adding anything else, I mean those are the kind of considerations that we would have to go with. Later on, we'd have to think about how to add all these various different uses that you want to that you mentioned. You mentioned retail. You say you don't really want to go forward with that, but you mentioned possible retail. You mentioned possible senior housing. You mentioned expansion of the existing space, and then a recreation center. How do we make sure that is oriented towards Route 7, and so that it can be which is generally I think what the comprehensive plan calls for, and allows a transition into the surrounding residential space. That's it.
Mr. Longo, it's going to be very difficult to move a 20,000 square foot building where it sits right now. So I think it would make a lot of sense to actually put, if we were to plan something, it would be, if I was to envision, incorporating Miss Gibson's plan, for example, if you take the cottage idea, you'd put it towards Munson Hill Road so that you have an effective transition, right? And you'd keep kind of the more intense buildings, if you will, closer to Route 7, where you have that pedestrian access and the rapid bus transport and other sorts of things. I'm happy. I mean, again, it's so early. Obviously, engineering is extensive. Rezonings are extensive.
I agree.
But I think that it makes a lot of sense. And we're not obviously going to be moving a building from where it sits right now.
I wasn't suggesting that. But I wasn't suggesting that. No, that's it for me.
Okay. Are there other task force members with comments or questions?
Marty.
I'm sorry, I can't. Alice, I'll get to everybody.
Yeah, just a question for Mr. Rahman. So given that there are already 2 community centers in the area, how would the Mosques Community Center be different? Would there be a specific gap it'd be filling in terms of programs or community members it'd be serving?
So our intent is to expand our community services that we currently have, including some of the trainings, some of the empowerment work for women, business trainings. We would just essentially have more community space available, as well as having, indoor basketball courts and possibly an indoor pool is kind of what we were thinking about. So essentially, that was the idea behind the community center, so that the community in Bailey's and Culmore in particular, would be able to access these facilities and meeting space, particularly taking just the rapid bus down Route 7 to be able to access the site. So that was the intent behind that, to essentially be able to move some of our community-based work into that facility. Because the current building that our social services is in is, the old house that's there, and we've totally outgrown it for the services that we're offering to the larger community right now. And what I didn't mention is, that we've just teamed up with the Capital Area Food Bank, as well as with Islamic Relief International, to increase our community services significantly by offering much more trainings and empowerment to families in need in the area. And we're working also with the Kaiser Family Foundation to look at the possibility of housing other needs-based medical type facilities, dental and otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
Other task force members? Joshua?
Okay, so I feel like this is more of a comment. I'm just trying to, I guess, summarize in my head for what's kind of happening. It's like, it sounds to me that for this Dar al Hijra property, that kind of your desire is to consolidate some neighboring parcels and the hope is to try and give you some flexibility to improve traffic and to make a bigger community center, and kind of do some of these institutional uses that kind of on the other side of the street at First Christian Church, they're looking to give up some of their institutional property to create an area for them to produce housing. I mean, maybe this is just more of a general comment, but I just think it's interesting. I guess I'm thinking that if this doesn't go through, it makes it harder for Dar al Hijra to adapt. And on the other hand, like some kind of the default for this area is just to build more housing. So I'm not sure. Like I said, this is not really a question; it's just kind of a general comment.
Other task force members with comments or questions? Robert?
Mr. Hoffman, the one question that I even had posed to Mrs. Gibson about when it was for sale, I think equally applies to you in that I don't understand why the center didn't purchase the property when they purchased the adjacent one, or at least refinanced it in 2014, I believe, for a $4.4 million conventional mortgage on just that empty acre to the side there off of 6160 Leesburg Pike.
No, that 4 million wasn't for that property. That was for the Edsel Road property.
It is recorded as in the public record as a deed against this property, but yes. But why didn't the center pursue in 2016 the purchase of Ms. Gibson's property?
So when the Gibson's property went up for sale, it was for 2.4 million. And some of our members actually approached the Gibsons to try to figure out a way to purchase the property. But very honestly, at 2.4 million was a little too rich for our community to handle at the time. We just didn't have the cash available to purchase. And we made, I believe, what we did offer to the Gibsons at the time was to say that any contract offer that was made, we would be happily try to figure out and match and be able to purchase that property. So I've actually recently spoken. Priscilla has said that she hasn't received a formal offer from the mosque. I said that I'm ready to make any formal offer. It's just that it from a financial standpoint, we've got to be able to. It takes a lot to raise $2 million to purchase a property that is assessed at 700.
Thank you for that answer. And Marty, can I go back to you now based on that information that he provided? And if Ms. Gibson is still on the line, does her nomination or proposal become moot if she decides to now sell to the center? And is there any interest in that?
Well, before we get into that, I don't think it's appropriate for the task force, to sort of serve as a mediator, negotiator, to encourage negotiations between two property owners who currently have potentially competing nominations for us to make a decision on. So, Robert, I think that's an important question, but I think it's a private question. And I don't want to put either Ms. Gibson on the spot or the mosque on the spot to negotiate or to discuss why negotiations did or didn't fail a number of years ago. There's obviously
Mr. Machowski, if you'll allow me.
Let me finish.
Okay, I'm sorry.
There's obviously an overlap here. There's obviously a potential conflict here. As we discussed and we phoned the board on the first nomination, we wanted to massage a little bit, if we could, our thinking on this about somehow encouraging the nominators to try to work something out. But I think that's as far as we should go, candidly. And I'm not comfortable,
Completely respect that opinion and agree entirely. I just don't want us going all the way down this rabbit hole and then 3 weeks later it's like, oh well, it was for nothing.
No, I understand, and we have obviously two proposals to make a judgment on. And Saif, let me ask you a question, and David, perhaps this is for you too. The one thing that distinguishes, in my mind, this from the First Christian Church proposal is that you seem to have a longer timeline. Am I correct that there will not be a concurrent rezoning application along with this plan amendment if it makes it to the work program?
Yeah, Mr. Machowski, you're absolutely correct. We don't have any plans currently for an immediate or any close rezoning.
Okay.
I think realistically, at a center of like this and a rezoning is probably at least in a 5 to 7 year horizon, and any building or breaking ground is probably in a 10-year horizon, just because of the costs involved and the money that needs to be raised.
Okay.
That said, I will say having the comprehensive plan as an option absolutely helps the mosque in terms of how they can fundraise and reach out to their members about a future vision. So it is very important.
Understood that. Any other comments by task force members before we open it up to the public? No. Graham, before you open it up, let me just note for the record here that the task force has received 2 communications. One, a letter from Judy Watson and Ed, and I'm going to butcher your name, Perich, and a Matthew Sage, who is the president of the Lee Boulevard Heights Citizens Association, and commented earlier. We have a letter from Matthew along with a detailed attachment. Those were circulated to task force members earlier, and I know I've read them, and encourage Matthew and others who might testify on those issues to try to be brief and keep it within the 3-minute target. With that, Graham,
So we have right now we have 2 members of the public that wish to speak. If others would like to speak, just remember to go into the panelists panel and raise your hand. The bottom right-hand corner, it's a little button. So we'll try Carol Martone again. She was having issues connecting on the previous one. So Carol, can you hear us?
Okay, yes, I can.
Great. So if you'd like to speak, feel free.
Okay, I just wanted to mention, I'm very naive about this. You keep mentioning community. Does that mean that's open to the public, or is that just for your religious group?
Would you like me to answer that, Mr. Machowski?
Do you want to answer that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the intent is to have it open to the larger community, to the public. It wouldn't just be for the Muslim community. Just like our thrift store right now is open to the public, our food bank is open to the public, our rent assistance programs are open to the public.
Okay, and then I had another question I wanted to ask. Since the First Christian Church is also planning their proposal and everything, they have that into effect. That's going to eliminate some of your parking, I believe, won't it?
So I've spoken to Pastor Moore, and the idea is that they are increasing their parking over there to continue to accommodate some of the parking agreements that we continue to have in place.
They're going to increase the parking when they have the new facility?
They will have to, just a point of clarification, their proposal is to increase the parking to meet the county parking requirements to accommodate the new development that they're proposing on the site.
Okay, okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Graham?
All right, the next speaker is Matthew Sage. Matthew, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Matthew, we hear you. Welcome. As I mentioned, we have received your communication, and it's been communicated with all the task force members. But please go ahead. Matthew?
Sorry. Hello? Hear me now?
Yes, we got
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to zero in on just a few questions. I mean, I appreciate Mr. Rahman's time, and we feel like we're good friends with the Islamic Center as well. We visited their open houses on numerous occasions, and we really like them as a neighbor. Having said that, I just wanted to ask a question of the zoning attorney that you have. In your application, you had mentioned that you're going for a 0.5 FAR, but I think your application, was it a mistake when you said you currently have 0.35 FAR? Because I read only 0.3 for public facilities in this area in the R3.
Right. No, and the 0.35 is in reference to the combination of uses. You're right for what the public facility use is. I think if you look at the plan that SAFE put forward, when you eliminate the retail and the potential senior housing, the FAA drops considerably in that scenario. I think it's a total of, and SAFE, kick me if I'm wrong here, 80,000 square feet?
Yeah, I believe that the current plan is about 80,000.
Which is significantly below what our current nomination talks about.
But bottom line is 0.5 is quite a large jump from what you've got right now.
And I guess what I'm saying is I don't think we need the full 0.5.
Sorry?
I don't think we need the full 0.5 anymore.
But that's what you're asking for.
Correct. That's what our nomination is. And if this gets forward to the SSPA process, just to be clear, if this gets nominated by the Planning Commission, there's another 18-month to 2-year process where the actual fine-tuning of the comprehensive plan language gets finalized. And that will include FAR limitations, such as amending it to reflect what we've shown you today.
Okay. Just as a point of clarification, David, I don't think the timeline is as long as 18 months for phase 2. Is that right, Michael?
To be completely honest, it depends on the complexity of each nomination and the amount of analysis that needs to go into it. Typically, though, it is not 18 months long.
All right. Thank you. All right. Matthew.
Second question is, between now and the next submission, are you going to modify your nomination to eliminate the residential and the retail components of your request? Since they're not.
I'll let you answer that one, Safe.
Yeah, so I think we're still, I think we still need to have a very thorough discussion with Ms. Gibson and her family to figure out how we can try to accommodate their thoughts and ideas and see if we can find a solution that we can work through. You know, the short answer is most likely yes, but I think that we want the flexibility to be able to reach some sort of an agreement or understanding with Ms. Gibson and her family, because obviously their property is very important to the overall plan. But I want to reiterate that the main intent of this was the community center concept, for not the other uses.
Third question would be, would you commit to not seeking a reduction in the required parking for zoning as you have in the past?
So unfortunately, I don't know what the required parking for zoning is at this point. And honestly speaking, we're still so early in the process. I should hope that that's not the case. But I think that it's so early in the process, Mr. Sage, that it would be premature for me to say that, you know, we're committing to something, and I don't want to
commit
to something that I don't know whether we can commit to or not at this point. Because this may happen many years after I'm not here, you know, we're going through probably several rounds of planning commission and board of supervisors stages before we get to a final thing. What I will say is I want to make sure that we are no longer a source of contention or difficulty for the community, that both Lee Boulevard Heights and the community along Munson Hill Road. I personally know many of my friends that live back there, And I want to make sure that that road is something that people can walk on with a sidewalk. And if you park at least on one side of the street, that you can still traverse that street with 2 cars without difficulty that exists there right now.
And just following up on that, I know it's a concept plan and it's not reality, but the concept of extending Olin Drive was you would probably meet with some resistance in the neighborhood about doing that, just as an FYI. That's just letting you know as a friendly neighbor. My last question would be for the staff. Given that there's a lot of intertwining issues with parking and traffic, as a kind of a newbie to this process, what could we expect the county to contribute in terms of helping us with traffic and parking mitigation in our neighborhood? It's not in direct control of the Islamic Center.
Sure. So and for clarification, Mr. Sage, I want to ask if you're speaking to existing challenges that you're facing or what we plan to do with this process. I can tell you that as part of our work program, a transportation analysis will likely be needed. We'll have to consider the amount of traffic that's being generated specifically by this nomination. And if it reaches a certain threshold, then our county staff will help conduct that analysis. In terms of existing challenges, there are channels for you all to share your concerns with the county. I don't know. I'll have to get back to you with some of the details on that in terms of what can be done today. And I don't know if that answers your question.
I've heard from previous board members about what they have done or tried to do with the county in the past to help with alleviation, specifically with the residential parking district designation. But it seems that the answer I keep getting back is now that we have a residential parking designation in our neighborhood, that it's a long and laborious process to amend. You can't simply amend it. You have to basically disassemble it and then redo it. So that's what I'm hearing. So I was hoping that as part of this process, we could get some additional help in that kind of amendment rather than blowing up and starting over again.
So it sounds like, and I think I understand your point. Some of those considerations happened after the sort of plan amendment stage. So we're in the screening phase now, and then the comprehensive plan amendment stage. And some of those considerations will have to be taken into account once they decide to move forward with the rezoning, or if they decide to move forward with the rezoning.
Right.
So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's not tied directly to the plan amendment process.
Gotcha. Other than that, I would just let our document will stand for itself, and those are the only questions I had, and I'll go back to the chairman.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you for the comprehensive document you provided us to look at. Graham, are there other public commenters?
There are no additional members of the public that are raising their hand. If there's anyone else in the public that wishes to speak, now is the time to raise your hand to be called on.
I would. Graham. Hi, Ms. Graham.
Ms. Gibson.
Go ahead, Ms. Gibson.
Okay. Yes. And as Mr. Raymond Safe mentioned, we are in dialogue, but you must realize we are living in the home and the property that the mosque seeks to build over. And, this nomination was filed on our property, unbeknownst to us. It is a current county policy to allow this to have other people file on your land, on other property owners' land. But that is the way I found out about it, was received a certified letter in the mail. Now within the last 2 weeks, we have begun discussions, but frankly, this is our family home, and merely because the mosque has acquired nearby properties or surrounding. I mean, we live there, we prefer to live there. And with the preponderance of property owners actually being in favor of this nomination, that would be everyone else except our 1 acre and the property owner that's on Munson Hill Road closest to the Jefferson. Were this to be supported, there would be nothing to preclude those in favor from rezoning and starting to develop all around us. And that is my family's fear. Safe and I are in discussion. Different things I can share with you. One of the suggestions our family had for him, and that is the property to the right of us that they own in between the Jefferson and our property is an acre, and on which the mosque pays no taxes. That's permissible under the 501c3 federal code. At the same time, there's property, a parcel of acreage located nearby that the county owns, on which it pays no taxes and has repeatedly requested ideas from the community on how best to use it. This is the property, the old Hoagie property located near the Greek church. It's just an open area. And our suggestion was to say that just to convey the interest in the property next door, the county convey their interest, that no one's paying taxes, and that would serve as a place to build, maybe on not quite as a large scale or, Taj Mahal type, but it would provide for the community and a place to build some of the amenities he mentioned, swimming pool.
Ms. Gibson, thank you for those comments. Again, I don't want us to be this a forum for negotiation, and whatever private discussions you have, we encourage you to continue and bless you and move forward with it. Okay. But you do raise, Penny? I'm sorry.
This is Penny Gross. I need to correct.
We do pay taxes on that property, by the way, just FYI.
I need to correct something that was said. The Hogue property, which is on the other side of the Greek Orthodox Church, is Fairfax County Park Authority land. The Park Authority purchased from the Hogues. There is a master plan on it. It is not just open space. It is a park. It is not going to be used for any kind of building of residential or anything else. It is a park. It is parkland in an area that badly needs the park space. So I just wanted to make sure that the task force understood that the whole property is a Fairfax County park.
Okay, thank you, Penny. But let me just, before I make a motion, I guess 2 motions or 1 motion, let me just note that an important issue that Ms. Gibson does raise and is raised by this nomination and is raised by another nomination we will consider at a subsequent meeting is a nominator proposing a plan amendment for property it does not own. I personally find that a little problematic. But I just want to mention, I just wanted to sort of raise that. But in order to get our discussion started, and we have 2 nominations before us.
I'm sorry, before we go into I have a question about that for staff. If we could, before we
go ahead.
Staff, should this go forward with this for the lots that aren't owned, what is the ability of if a homeowner wanted to do something that on their lot within their existing zoning or zoning, but let's say they wanted to create do a special exception in order to continue building on their house, or something like that. With that, but it no longer conformed with the comprehensive plan on that, but it, conformed with the, previous comprehensive plan.
I got you. So what often happens when an option for a bigger vision like this happens is that a property often retains its base plan. So probably what would happen is it would continue to be planned how it is, and it would have an option kind of overlaid that would come with conditions. That's probably what the structure would be if this were successful with a plan amendment.
Okay, so just repeating that back to you in my own words, so that I make sure I understand. So any properties that are not currently owned by the nominator, they still retain their base plan, and so they can still be utilized and built out according to their base plan that it currently exists. But then they could have the option to go to the new plan should they desire.
That's a likely structure. Yes, that's typical. Of course, the property owner retains all its entitlement and current rights, but your question is about conformance to the comprehensive plan. What's typical is that would continue.
All right, and then the second question is not necessarily to what we're doing, but would be, can someone rezone something that they don't own?
No.
Okay, thank you. That was my questions. Thank you. Marty, you're on mute.
Okay, we have two nominations before us. Because they are separate nominations and each nominator deserves an independent, judgment by this task force, I think I'll start with a motion that the task force recommend that the Gibson nomination be included in the work program, subject to the suggestions and conditions included in the staff report. Is there a second?
Second.
So discussion on the motion? Robert?
Marty, in looking at the Gibson proposal, I would love for us to actually look at that for 7 to 8, housing per acre, including the 6160 Leesburg Pike lot in that approval there. Even though I know Ms. Gibson didn't put that lot forward as part of her proposal, I think making that entire section consistent housing on that side makes a lot of sense. And I would contrast that with approving potentially the 19 MA other 5 to just be the items on the other side. Does that make sense? So
I understand what you're saying, that a suggestion be made that the nominator consider additional land purchases to include.
Well, that the plan amendment should be.
We do a plan amendment to make that possible.
Correct. For those two combined lots.
All right. You want to make that as an amendment to my amendment?
If you're amending to it, yes, that I think would be a great way to handle that particular plan.
Is there a second to Robert's amendment?
Second.
As a second, is there discussion on Robert's amendment?
Just to be clear, what can someone bring up a map and point out exactly what lot we're talking about?
It's the lot to the west of the
vacant
site.
one.
Correct, Jeffrey. It's the vacant lot to the other side, not towards the current center side.
Okay.
So it would be consistent in existing street flow and everything else. And it would allow the county to look at that as a plan amendment to really look at adding in the housing that Ms. Gibson is proposing.
So as the amendment is the amendment to my motion, as I understand it, Robert, is to suggest that we go through this process, the county consider a unified decision regarding the Gibson property and the property to the west of the Gibson property to allow similar development.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Is there any discussion on Robert's, any additional discussion on Robert's amendment to the motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Likos?
I'd like to ask staff counsel if it's in fact within the purview of this group to
Yes.
combine applications into a single consideration. I appreciate what staff has said, that the two shall be analyzed concurrently and coordinated, but I believe the Roberts language goes beyond that, and we are in fact compelling private property owners to do things that are outside of their necessary rights.
Sure.
So I'd
So,
like to have counsel's opinion on that.
So for clarification, I do want to let you all know that as a recommending body, that your recommendations are just that, your recommendations. And so in terms of the language that you all choose to put forth, it's up to you, with the understanding that they are similar to staff's recommendations. And so some of the details that you all may like to see, again, may not be included specifically in the authorization. So depending on how or if each of these nominations are authorized, it will provide staff the framework for how we are to study and look at the site. And a lot of the concerns that are being included will absolutely do, but it may not be tied directly to the specific language that you all are putting forth. So it's good for discussion. This goes to our elected officials. So
okay,
space is
Michael,
yours.
thank you. Is there further discussion on Robert's amendment to the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I have a question. What's exactly what we're voting on? Is it to amend the specific 02?
We are voting. There's a motion on the table, which is to move the nomination through to the work program, subject to the discussions and conditions we have in the staff report. Robert has offered an amendment to that motion to include language for our purposes in our comment section, that the county consider taking two plots of land, two addresses, and looking at them as a unified piece of land for a proposal consistent with the Gibson proposal.
Okay.
Amendment to the motion. It's been seconded.
I have additional amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Is that Mr. Likos?
Yes, it is.
All right, an amendment. You have an amendment to the amendment? Or do you have an amendment to the motion? If you have an amendment to the motion, you can offer it after we dispense with this amendment.
Okay, I'll reserve my comments as an amendment to the next
Okay,
one.
so the motion is on, the vote is on the amendment to the motion offered by Robert. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
No.
The nays appear to have it. Robert, are you okay with that?
I don't have a choice. We're good with it.
Rob, you can ask for a roll call vote if you'd like.
It's okay.
Okay, the amendment is not agreed to. Mr. Likos is recognized for purposes of amendment.
Yes, I would like to make sure on the Gibson amendment that language is added that would require that new stormwater management system either retain or manage the stormwater runoff on site, or direct it to the system north and east of the property, so stormwater shall not increase flow into the system serving Ravenwood Park or Lake Barcroft.
And I will second that amendment. Is there discussion on the amendment? It's comparable to the language we adopted for the First Christian Church. Exactly. There discussion on that amendment? Everyone in favor of the amendment, say aye.
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 Say nay. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. We're back to the original motion. Is there further discussion on the motion or further amendment to the motion? Hearing none, the vote will be on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Did I hear a nay?
Yep.
I'm sorry. Let's do on this motion, let's do a roll call as we report the yeas and nays on our report to the county.
There was
Robert,
one nay, that's it.
let's do a roll call just because we do report this on our form to the county. Robert? I'm sorry, Robert Chamberlain, you're on mute.
Nay.
Nay? What?
Aye.
Aye. Yes.
Aye.
Alice, unmute yourself.
Aye.
Aye. Barbara?
Aye.
Dave, Nguyen?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Vinod?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Karen?
Nay.
And I vote aye. That's 11-2.
I concur.
But I have confirmed that. Okay, so the issue before the task force is the mosque nomination, which is number 6 in the scorecard. I will, on this one, there are a host of issues raised by this nomination. They are not as critical because, in my view, because the nominator is not intending to move through a rezoning application, a concurrent rezoning application. But a lot of the issues that we have here are similar to the issues we confronted with the church, the First Christian Church nomination. And I just want to reflect that we had a good discussion here with the nominator and with the representatives from the surrounding community about addressing those issues as appropriate. So I will move that the task force approve forwarding the nomination with our recommendation to the Planning Commission that it be included in the work program. I will also include my amendment that the language that we have just added to the Gibson nomination regarding stormwater and make that motion. So to approve the nomination for inclusion in the work program with the language similar to the language we adopted for Ms. Gibson nomination. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there you have a second? Is there discussion on the motion? No discussion on the motion by task force members. I'll call the question. Everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, let's do a roll call. Make sure we have that recorded. We'll start from the top. Robert?
Nay.
Joshua?
Aye.
Jeff? Jeff Longo? Jeff, you're on mute.
Sorry, you're going. Ask me. I'm trying to make sure that my computer's being slow. Aye.
Aye. Alice?
Abstain.
Abstain? Barbara Burgess?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye.
Bill? Ed?
Aye.
Ed Feig?
Aye.
Said. Vinod?
Nay.
Nay. Jan?
Did you say Jan?
Yes, Jan.
Jan votes aye.
Votes aye. Karen? Karen?
Nay.
Nay. And I vote, the chair votes aye. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, looks like we have 9 ayes, 3 nays, and 1 abstention.
That's what I have.
Right?
That's what I have.
Okay. Is there any other business or any other comments from task force members? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
This is Barbara, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And everyone, thank you. See you in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.